Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. The first thing I noticed when I got home wasn't Amanda. It was the silence. Normally, she'd have music playing while she cooked, or she'd be watching one of those renovation shows she could never get enough of. That evening, the house felt empty. Then I spotted her through the kitchen window. She was sitting alone on the back deck with two glasses of iced tea, staring at the yard like she was waiting for a storm. The moment I stepped outside, she looked up. "Steve, can we talk? You've been waiting for me?" She nodded. I didn't want to do this over dinner. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "Then don't waste time." She wrapped both hands around her glass. "I need you to hear me out before you get angry." "I'll hear you out. Whether I get angry depends on what comes next." She took a long breath. "You know I've been volunteering at the community fundraiser every Saturday." "I know. I met someone there." I wasn't surprised. For the last month, she'd been leaving earlier than usual and coming home with stories about planning meetings that somehow lasted 4 hours. I never said anything because I preferred facts over assumptions. "I know that too," I said. Her eyebrows lifted. "You do?" "I know his name is Derek Sullivan." The color left her face. I wasn't hiding it. "You weren't exactly advertising it either." She looked away. "It started as friendship. That's usually how these stories begin." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, she looked back at me. "I've developed feelings for him." I held her gaze. "Go on." "I still love you." "I didn't ask that." Tears formed in her eyes. "I don't want to lose what we have." "But?" She swallowed. "I don't want to lose Derek either." There it was. No excuses. No half-truths. Just the truth. I leaned back in my chair. "So, what exactly are you asking me?" She hesitated before answering. "I don't want a divorce." I figured. "I want to stay married." "And?" "I want to see him too." The words hung in the air between us. She rushed to fill the silence. "I've been reading about couples who make this work. They set boundaries. They're honest with each other. Nobody lies. Nobody sneaks around." I couldn't help shaking my head. "So that's the plan?" "I'm trying to be honest instead of cheating." "No," I said calmly. "You're asking for permission before cheating." She flinched. "That's not fair." "It is from where I'm sitting." She wiped a tear from her cheek. "I thought if we talked openly, maybe we'd both have the freedom to choose." I almost smiled. "A woman named Lauren Bennett has been flirting with me at my fitness club for nearly a year." Amanda's expression changed instantly. "You never told me that." "Because it never mattered." I leaned forward. "I made vows. That settled it." She stared at the table. "If you wanted to see Lauren, I wouldn't stop you." I laughed once, not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. "You're not giving me freedom, Amanda." She looked up. "Then what am I doing?" "You're asking me to help you destroy the marriage you promised to protect." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I stood and picked up my truck keys from the table. "You've had weeks to convince yourself this makes sense." I looked her straight in the eye. "You can give me 1 week before you hear my answer." Then I walked back into the house, leaving her alone with the silence she had created. Amanda didn't bring Derek up again that week. She acted like the conversation had never happened. She made my favorite meals. She folded my laundry before I asked. She even suggested we go out for dinner on Friday like we used to. I declined every time. Being polite wasn't the same as fixing what she'd broken. Exactly 1 week later, I came home to find her sitting at the kitchen island. She looked up the moment I walked in. "I've been waiting." "I know." I poured myself a glass of water and sat across from her. "You wanted an answer," I said. "You'll get one. But first, I want the truth. All of it." "I already told you." "You told me the ending. I want the beginning." She nodded slowly. "I met Derek Sullivan 6 weeks ago. He helped organize the charity fundraiser." "Did he know you were married?" "Yes." "From the first day?" "Yes." I let that sink in. "So he chose a married woman." Amanda shifted in her chair. "He said he respected our marriage." I almost laughed. "A man chasing another man's wife doesn't get to use the word respect." She looked away. "He said feelings aren't something you can control." "No, actions are." The room fell quiet. Finally, I asked the question that mattered. "Whose idea was this?" She frowned. "What?" "Asking me for permission." She hesitated just long enough to answer for me. "Derek suggested it." "I thought so. He said honesty was better than secrets. He also knew I'd probably say no." Amanda didn't answer. I continued. Were you planning one date or were you planning a relationship? A relationship. So while I was paying the mortgage, cutting the grass, and building our future, another man was supposed to enjoy the benefits without carrying any of the responsibility. That's not how I saw it. I know. I folded my arms. Here's my answer. She straightened in her seat. I'm not agreeing to anything today. Her face fell. But I'm giving you one opportunity to prove this marriage still matters to you. What do you mean? Starting now, Derek disappears from your life. She blinked. For how long? Until I decide otherwise. She stared at me. No meetings. She opened her mouth. No charity events if he's there. Her shoulders stiffened. No phone calls. She sighed. No social media. She looked frustrated now. What if he reaches out? You ignore him. Steve, I cut her off. If he truly cares about you, waiting won't scare him. She was quiet. And if I don't agree? I met her eyes. Then tomorrow morning I'll be meeting with a divorce attorney. The words landed exactly the way I intended. Not as a threat, as a fact. Amanda looked down at the counter for several seconds before speaking. I'll do it. I nodded once. Good. She looked relieved. What happens now? I stood and grabbed my truck keys. Now I find out whether Derek Sullivan wants a future with you. I paused at the doorway. Or whether he just enjoys chasing another man's wife. Amanda kept her word. At least, as far as I could tell. She stopped going to the charity meetings and told the organizers she needed a break. She blocked Derek's number in front of me without me asking. Every evening she came straight home from work. But trust doesn't come back because someone behaves for a few days. It comes back when they have something to lose and still make the right choice. 10 days later, I came home carrying a manila envelope. Amanda noticed it immediately. What's that? My answer. She stared at the envelope while I hung my jacket on the chair. I thought you already answered. I answered emotionally. I sat across from her and slid the envelope onto the table. This is my practical answer. She slowly opened it. Inside were 4 typed pages. The marriage continuation agreement, she read aloud. I nodded. I wrote it. She looked up. You were serious? I've never been more serious. Amanda began reading. The first page explained exactly what she had asked for. She wanted another relationship without ending our marriage, so I had written down what that actually meant. The next pages listed the conditions. If she chose Derek, our joint savings would immediately become separate accounts. She would move into the guest bedroom. There would be no shared vacations, no pretending everything was normal around friends or family. Every planned meeting with Derek had to be disclosed beforehand. No lies, no overnight trips, no bringing him into our home, no asking me to cover for her. Halfway through the document, Amanda lowered the papers. This feels cold. It is. You really thought all this through. I had to. You certainly did. She winced. I wasn't trying to hurt you. Intent doesn't erase consequences. She continued reading. At the end was one final paragraph. If either of us decided the arrangement had become unbearable, divorce proceedings would begin immediately, with no argument from the other person. Amanda looked up again. So, if I sign this, you get exactly what you asked for. She stayed silent for a long moment. I thought you were going to forbid it. I don't control you. I folded my hands on the table. I control what I'm willing to live with. She looked back down at the agreement. This doesn't feel exciting anymore. It wasn't supposed to. Another minute passed before she reached for the pen lying beside the papers. You'll sign too? I already have. She studied my signature, then quietly signed her own name beneath it. When she finished, she slid the papers back across the table. I never imagined it would look like this. I tucked the agreement back into the envelope. Neither did I. She looked at me carefully. So, what happens next? I stood and picked up the envelope. Now, I said calmly, I learn everything I can about Derek Sullivan. For the first time since our conversation began nearly 2 weeks earlier, Amanda looked genuinely nervous. Amanda thought I was going to hire a private investigator. I didn't. Everything I needed was sitting in plain sight. Most people just never bothered looking. The next morning, before work, I searched Derek Sullivan online. His social media was exactly what I expected. Smiling photos, charity events, hiking trips, inspirational quotes about honesty and living your truth. None of it meant anything. People post the version of themselves they want strangers to believe. I needed someone who knew the version behind the pictures. After a few hours of searching, I found Thomas Grant, Derek's former business partner. I called him that evening. "I'm sorry to bother you," I said. "My name is Steve. My wife recently became acquainted with Derek Sullivan." Thomas was quiet for several seconds. Finally, he asked, "Is she married?" "She is." He sighed. "I had a feeling." That answer alone told me I was talking to the right person. We met 2 days later at a small diner halfway between our towns. Thomas didn't exaggerate. He didn't insult Derek. He simply told me what had happened. "Derek loves the chase," he said while stirring his coffee. "Once the excitement disappears, he starts looking for someone else." "Has he done this before?" Thomas nodded. "More than once." He explained that Derek had broken up an engagement a few years earlier by convincing another man's fiancée that she deserved something more exciting. The relationship lasted less than 4 months. There was more. Derek's construction supply business had failed after he borrowed money from friends and never paid most of it back. Several former partners had taken him to civil court over unpaid debts. Everything Thomas told me came with dates, names, and documents. Nothing was gossip. Everything could be verified. Over the next week, I did exactly that. Public court records confirmed the lawsuits. Business filings confirmed the failed company. Even better, I found several interviews Derek had given to a local newspaper years earlier. The image he sold to Amanda, the honest, dependable man, didn't match the trail he'd left behind. Meanwhile, Amanda kept following our agreement. Then, one evening, she came home looking uneasy. "Derek stopped me outside my office today." I looked up from my dinner. "What did he want?" "He said he only wanted 5 minutes." "And?" "I told him no." She hesitated. "But before he walked away, he said waiting forever wasn't part of his plan." I nodded slowly. That single sentence told me more than anything Thomas had shared. A man who respected Amanda would have respected her decision. A man who wanted to win would start applying pressure. I finished my dinner, set my fork down, and looked at Amanda. "I think it's time for Derek to show us exactly who he is." 3 days later, I surprised Amanda over breakfast. "I've changed my mind." She looked up from her coffee. "About what?" "Derek." Her eyes searched my face, trying to figure out where the conversation was going. "I'm willing to let you meet him." She nearly dropped her mug. "Really? Once?" She frowned. "Just once? In a public place, during the day. No secrets." She studied me carefully. "You trust me now?" "This isn't about trust." "Then why?" "Because I'd rather you see the truth yourself than spend the next 10 years wondering if I kept you away from your soulmate." She didn't answer. I picked the cafe. Saturday afternoon. A busy place downtown with large windows facing the street. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I drove there, watched Amanda walk through the front door, then parked across the street where neither of them noticed me. 45 minutes later, she came out alone. She wasn't crying. She looked defeated. When she climbed into my truck, neither of us spoke for almost 5 minutes. Finally, I asked, "Well?" She stared through the windshield. "It wasn't what I expected." "What happened?" She let out a slow breath. "He wasn't happy." I gathered that. "He asked why I was making him wait." "And?" "I told him I wasn't leaving my marriage without being absolutely sure." I nodded for her to continue. "He got angry." "That didn't surprise me." "He said you were manipulating me." "What else?" Amanda swallowed. "He said if I really loved him, I would have packed my bags already." I stayed quiet. He kept talking about what he wanted, how long he'd been waiting, how unfair this was for him. She laughed bitterly. "Do you know what he never asked?" "What?" "How I was doing." The truck was silent again. Then she looked at me. I kept waiting for him to ask if I was okay. "He didn't?" "No." She shook her head slowly. "He just kept complaining." I reached into the center console and pulled out a thick folder. "I think you're ready for this." She looked at it. "What's that?" "Everything I found on Derek Sullivan." She opened it carefully. The first page was a copy of one of the court judgments against him. The second listed unpaid business debts. The third contained newspaper clippings about his failed company. She turned each page slower than the last. Then she stopped. Her eyes locked on one sentence. "Derek was engaged?" "He was. He told me he'd never even been close." "He lied." She kept reading. Every few pages, another lie surfaced. By the time she reached the end of the folder, She closed it without saying a word. She leaned back in her seat and covered her face with both hands. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, Amanda looked ashamed instead of confused. Amanda didn't speak during the drive home. She carried the folder inside and placed it on the kitchen table like it weighed 50 pounds. I poured myself a glass of water and waited. She finally looked up. I was wrong. I didn't answer. I wasn't just wrong, Steve. She took a shaky breath. I was selfish. That was the first honest thing she'd said since this started. She pulled one of the papers from the folder and stared at it again. I defended him. You did. I argued with you. You did. I actually thought you were standing in the way of my happiness. I nodded once. And now? She laughed quietly, but there wasn't any humor in it. Now I think he would have ruined my life. She folded the paper and slid it back into the folder. I kept telling myself he understood me. I leaned against the counter. No. He understood exactly what to say. Amanda looked at me. I don't even know when I stopped thinking clearly. You liked the attention. She didn't deny it. He made me feel exciting again. He made you feel chosen. She lowered her head. Yes. I let the silence do the work. After nearly a minute, she stood and walked toward me. I'm sorry. I remained where I was. I know saying that isn't enough. No, it doesn't fix anything. No, a tear rolled down her cheek. I hurt the one person who never gave me a reason to doubt him. I folded my arms. So, what do you think happens now? I'll do whatever it takes. That's easy to say. I mean it. Good. I looked directly at her. Because rebuilding trust isn't something you ask for. She nodded slowly. It's something you earn. She wiped her eyes. I'll leave the charity committee. You should. I'll block Derek everywhere. You should have done that weeks ago. I know. I'll answer any question you ever ask me. I expect you to. She took another deep breath. What if that's still not enough? I thought about it for a moment before answering. Then we won't stay married. She closed her eyes. I understand. I hope you do. She looked at me again. I never realized what I was actually asking you to accept. You weren't asking me to share my wife. I waited until she met my eyes. You were asking me to become second place in my own marriage. She couldn't hold my gaze. Instead, she quietly sat back down at the table. For the first time since this all began, there was no defense left. No excuses. No arguments. Only consequences. And I still had one final lesson for her to learn. A week passed before I brought the subject up again. Not because I had forgotten, because I wanted Amanda to sit with everything she'd done without me reminding her every day. That Saturday morning, we were drinking coffee on the back deck, the same place where this whole mess had started. She looked different, quieter, not broken, just honest. I've been thinking, she said. I know. She looked at me. No, I don't think you do. I set my mug down. Try me. She took a slow breath. If Lauren had asked you to leave me? I waited. I don't think I could have handled it. I nodded. You wouldn't have. She gave a small, sad smile. I finally understand. What do you understand? That I wasn't asking for permission. No. I was asking you to live with being my second choice. I didn't answer immediately. She had finally said the words herself. I kept telling myself I could love both of you, she continued, but that's not what I was doing. What were you doing? I was trying to keep the safety of my marriage while chasing the excitement of someone new. Exactly. She stared into her coffee. I don't even recognize the person who thought that was fair. I leaned back in my chair. People don't destroy marriages in one day. She looked up. They do it one selfish decision at a time. Amanda nodded. I know. No, I said calmly. Now you know. Silence settled between us. Finally, she asked the question she'd been avoiding. Do you still love me? Yes. Hope appeared on her face. I held up my hand before she could speak. Love isn't the problem. Her smile disappeared. Trust is. She slowly nodded. I figured. I stood and rested my hands on the deck railing. I'm willing to try to rebuild this. She looked relieved. But there won't be any halfway effort. I understand. We start marriage counseling. Okay. You answer every question honestly. I will. And if I ever find out Derek is back in your life, I looked directly at her. There won't be another conversation. She didn't hesitate. There won't be a reason for one. I believed she meant it. Whether I could ever trust it would take time. 3 months later, Life finally felt normal again. Amanda left the charity committee. We started marriage counseling every other Tuesday. Some sessions were uncomfortable. Some ended with both of us sitting in the truck in complete silence before driving home. But we kept showing up. That mattered. Trust wasn't fully back, but it was growing one honest conversation at a time. One evening, I came home from work and found Amanda sitting on the back deck with 2 glasses of iced tea. I smiled to myself. It was the same place where she'd first asked me to let another man into our marriage. She looked up as I walked over. Long day? Nothing I couldn't handle. She handed me a glass. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun disappear behind the trees. Finally, she spoke. Thank you for not giving up on us. I looked at her. Don't thank me. She frowned. Thank the fact that you finally chose this marriage. She nodded. I will. I reached over and took her hand. This time, neither of us had anything left to prove. We had already learned the lesson that mattered most. A marriage doesn't survive because someone wins. It survives because both people choose it every single day. Thank you for watching.